two nouns, air and loom. It is about culture being a weaving through time with continuities. So there are so many different things to talk about, but one of them is when you did this, when you decided, no, I'm going to do this, were your challenges different than what Nikiko's are now?
Yeah, the world was different then. I think it was easier to be radical back then because if you failed, it was private. Facebook, tweets, Nikki fails, a lot of people are going to know about that. You know, and it's a very different rhythm because when you could fail privately, you're willing to work and build on your failures and mistakes. I'm not so sure young people here are that comfortable about failing because a lot of young people were brought up in a world where it was all about succeeding. And that's how you are here, why you're here at Berkeley, because you probably all have succeeded. So, I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely, one of the things that I've had to kind of reorient myself to as I've come back and learned, I feel like I've been studying farming and practicing farming because there's so much to learn, is exactly this reorientation of myself towards making mistakes. I've said this before publicly and I will say it again. Part of my job as a beginning farmer is making really big mistakes. And part of the shift was in an academic realm. I loved studying, I loved learning, and my relationship with mistakes was corrective. If I made a mistake, I would want to correct it to avoid making that mistake again. And as a farmer, I've had to realize that making mistakes is actually a practice that's really rich, because when I make a mistake and I break something, as I often do on the farm, I have to learn how to fix it. And learning how to fix it means that I understand the piece of equipment better, means I understand tools better, means I understand when to ask my dad for help and when I should try to do it on my own. And so it's been a real shift for me to value mistakes and like stay in the space of uncertainty and struggle.
Bob, do poets make mistakes?
Oh yeah, and nobody cares, so it's pretty rare. But you can make the mistake. I'm sure you, as a writer, must have done that, of going a long way in the wrong direction in a project that you put a lot of energy into. But it's more like gardening vegetables than fruit. It's much easier to plow up and start over. It's a thing I would think about orchards is that it's a major decision to decide how many years do you get to money again if you plow up an orchard?
One of the challenges is you get one crop a year. So one of the challenges I have, I just turned 60. How many more harvests do I have? And you could count them on 2 hands, hopefully more than that. But it makes you recalculate mistakes. But Nikiko has lots of years for mistakes ahead of her. So.
But it's true, Bob, in the car on the way here, we were talking about making mistakes. And I've now, after 4 years, we do this one practice on our farm of shaping the form of the trees. And so we pull branches, we bend branches, we use ropes so that they kind of resemble a wine glass. And after 3 years, finally, I now can see the branch that I did not pull hard enough 3 years ago is now visible to me. And now the branch has grown too thick and it's not pliable anymore. So I will have to live with the mistake I made in my first year farming forever. And this is part of the humility of farming. But so yes, you're right. The trees themselves are like archives.
And if you, when I was trying to teach Nikki and Kiko how to prune, and I sort of said, you want a tree is properly shaped like a nice wine glass, not tight like a champagne glass, nor really wide like a martini glass. So it occurred to me that it's good if you drink a lot and you prune. Make a good poem with that.
So when I read Epitaph for a Peach these many years ago, and thinking that what we had all experienced in my generation, corporate fruit had been selected to last a long time, look great, and have no taste at all. And so you were going to be showing the world that you could make a living growing great fruit. And nectarines as well as raisins, are those still the three crops that you do?
Well, I wanted to show the world.
Is my romantic idea right? You've been able to?
Yeah. Well, initially I wanted to show the world you could grow them. Making a living, I wasn't so sure about. But I got very lucky at the age I started. We started farming organically in the 80s. And in the 90s, as the whole food revolution took off, Whole Foods started expanding, Alice Waters and her wonderful revolution, there was this whole new exploding world where chefs were becoming rock stars. Our fruit happened to catch that wave, and we've had some very, very good years, and it continues that way. That landscape is going to be different for Nikiko, though. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't talked much about this today, but we talk about it a lot at home, and that is climate change. And the drought as an example of extreme weather that is really unprecedented. We all know that this was the warmest winter on record ever in California, and we are already seeing the ramifications of that in some of our varieties. Some of our varieties haven't set very many blossoms, which means the yield for a few of the varieties is going to be lower this year. So, I know that climate change may be one of the defining struggles of how we're going to adapt to a changing climate. And I know we talk about it a lot, and you always joke that you don't have to worry about it, that you'll be gone.
I only have so many harvests left. So.
But it's something that weighs on my mind because it shapes the viability of farming, of whether I can whether there's going to be something to pass on to another generation after me.
Well, Bob, I have a question for you. Is there a role of art in this food movement?
Oh, I think there is. I mean, in a way, I think there's always been the connection between, lots of people, the oldest poems in the European tradition are, on the one hand, the Iliad and the Odyssey, the war poems, though the Odyssey is really about coming home and farming in some way. Wendell Berry talks about the fact that it is the end of his wanderings. The first thing Odysseus does when he gets home is he goes to see the goatherd. And the goatherd says, "Don't worry," recognizes him and says, "Don't worry, everything's okay." The herd, we've still been keeping the herds. They're raising hell up at the house. You got to take care of the house, but everything's okay.